My name is Khulekani Msweli. I'm an artist, designer, social entrepreneur, and community activist from a place called Vuvulane in the Kingdom of Eswatini. My exhibition, A Eulogy of a Black Man, came about as a culmination of work which stems from, I suppose, a bit of frustration on my side, where in all the readings I've done, either from growing up to my current adulthood, I found myself having so many questions about the Black man, because whether it's written literature or visual works I've seen, the Black man is constantly depicted as a savage, as a good-for-nothing person, as someone who doesn't have something positive going for them throughout history. And I felt it's quite a one-sided story without, of course, neglecting, yes, some of the bad things, I suppose, men have done or Black men have done. But I felt it's constantly a one-sided story. Even now, during 2020, when we were faced with COVID and ongoing COVID-19 situations, the issue continued to bother me because the body of the Black man was constantly being demonized, constantly being tortured, and seen as a good-for-nothing body. And with this eulogy, it was a bit of a homage, in a way, to my life, where I found only during death we start maybe to talk about a Black man as maybe he was good, he was this and that. And I felt it's important for me as an artist and a creator to share my own story while I'm alive. So the whole body of work in this solo exhibition is, in a way, a slight chronicle of what my life has been about. And a eulogy is something I believe all of us should be undertaking every 10 years of our life, because it allows us to reflect how have our lives been, and what is it maybe looking forward to the next 10 years we'd like our lives to be. And the work, yes, it's kind of like a depiction where I was looking at myself maybe as what would happen at my memorial service if I were to die due to COVID-19. What would people say? How would people react? And the work takes you on that journey of what I want to say in my own words, in words which have been not written by someone else, because in most cases our narratives have always been shared by white men or white women who see us and then narrate our stories without us being the narrators. And I must say, my narrative is probably different from the narratives I've grown up reading. And I've been proud in the sense of when I look back and see my contributions to society and my contributions hopefully going ahead for the next 10 years. So as people probably take in the exhibition, it's a way of also reflecting on our own lives. What are we saying about our own lives? How do we deal with death? And what is it we want our lives, especially as Black men, to depict? And what words do we have to share with the world as Black men living today? This particular piece becomes an introduction to the show, where in any memorial service you tend to find the portrait of the deceased person. And with this particular one, it was a way of having this thought bubble which says, "Don't cry for me," in the sense I believe I've lived a very fulfilling life, a very wholesome life, and it's not a matter of the mourners crying, but a matter of everyone celebrating the life I have lived. Siyophaka is the name of this piece, and Siyophaka, when translating it into English, means we are going to get food. So this particular piece really resonates with the activity that I saw happening in my community. And as I am a community activist, I run an NPO which deals with social issues in my community. And through our soup kitchen, we started having so much need for food, from the children to their parents and their grandchildren. and the lines just kept on going on and on and on. I'd only seen such lines of need during probably elections. So this piece is more or less a reflection of that, and the use of a blanket is really a matter of showing the warmth and the embrace which all of us came together during a tough time to really show love to one another. So with this particular piece, it's a blurb because most of the work I have done were inspired by kind of comic blurbs. And it's titled, He Thought, Wrote, Prayed, Loved, and Read a Lot. Because those are some of the things I do and love. And it's through those, I suppose, actions in my life that have constantly led me to being who I am. And they continue to direct a lot of my thought process and my questioning of the world we live in. So Thoughts of a Black Man is, I'd call it an artist book or zine of sorts, whereby it really helped me. It was a piece of work which allowed me to really record my thoughts, feelings, and observations, and also question what COVID-19 was about and continues to be about, but looking at all the references I could find in my own home library. Spending so much time indoors during COVID allowed me to really go through my own library and find meanings of certain things, meanings of spirituality and meanings of life in general, but kind of drawing from the vast library that I own. And it became just a place of solace and a place where I could find a lot of answers which I suppose in general sense were hard to find. So it's an art piece which I think really was able to culminate what was happening throughout 2019 into 2021, a full year of my reflections of living during COVID-19. Hobnobbing with Society is the title of this particular piece. It's quite a fun piece because it was my way of trying to depict the dual worlds I've lived in, whereby I find myself interacting with high society, the rich, the famous, the king, the politician, so the people who are decision makers in society, and yet also living in a rural community. I interact a lot with community members who are in need, and being in that social space, I found it important for me becoming this middle ground person who's able to express the needs of those that I live with, yet also trying to make those that I live with understand where I suppose the more affluent thought is coming from, and then finding synergies in how both entities can come together to better one's life. And I think that the issue of the blurb which says he only drank champagne, it was one of those social taboos where I've always, when people asked at social gatherings, do I take any alcohol? And I'd say, no, I don't actually drink, but of course a glass of champagne will do me good. This particular piece is titled The Medicine Cabinet. Throughout COVID, I think last year, 2020, we saw a lot of panic where everyone was going through, I suppose, their medicine cabinets, yet also running out of alcohol and rummaging their cellars, trying to have something to comfort them. Yet at the same time, there weren't as many bottles of champagne being popped, which means it was a situation where the most affluent of society were also affected. So, but then the thought started coming in where we started questioning indigenous knowledge systems, where Madagascar had made a public claim to say they have found a cure to COVID-19 through some of their traditional medicine plants. And that sparked a big I suppose, questioning in my mind that as Africans, we've always had quite a lot of knowledge in the space of medicine, but traditional medicine. And the feeling was it's never quite shared in a very positive light. It's always seen as something that's as inferior to modern medicine. And I really wanted to share what my own concoction of medicine I was making during COVID was. And it was a mixture of black pepper, lemon, lemongrass, sugar in it before I went to bed. So each bottle has the actual contents of the medicine remedy I was making. All you'd have to do is add a good dosage of boiling water and drink it. And if you look on the top of the bottles, there is number 1 missing. So this is also a narrative of some of the parties we used to have after a funeral service, where it's a narrative on how family members, especially I've seen in Eswatini or in Africa, where family members start stealing some of the property belonging to the deceased. So all in all, it's a narrative of the lives that the rich are living, and a narrative of indigenous knowledge systems, how maybe we can start having deeper conversations on our indigenous knowledge systems, yet also trying to preserve a certain notion of decency in making sure that our traditional medicines are taken as prestigious as probably champagne would be. So with this particular piece titled Lituna, which translates as coffin or grave, is probably one of the most important pieces of this particular exhibition, because I started questioning how I'd like to be buried once I pass away. And it's always been simple to me, where I'd like to be cremated, and I would like my cremation urn to be made of just simple mud. And so with this, for me, it returns the essence of who we are and what it is that we should be actually narrating about death. We have made, as a society, and especially maybe as African society, we have probably taken the wrong direction in terms of what death is and the ceremony behind death, where it has become so flamboyant and expensive. And actually, it's so sad to see so many families going into obscene loans just to have a fancy casket and a fancy funeral, which to me makes no sense when the family will be left with so much debt. And also the most hideous thing of even taking brand new blankets and covering the coffins. So I suppose the piece is really an interrogation of understanding who are we as humans, and can we return to simplicity? Can we return to the essence of a humble way of returning to where we came from? With this particular piece, which is titled Mkenketse, which narrates to the one that likes being everywhere and traveling everywhere. It's a narrative on how I have enjoyed traveling. And with traveling, I've learned a lot about different cultures and about a way of life. It has really opened my mind to how I think, how I perceive other people. So I've found traveling to be an integral and important part for my life as a Black man. But it's also a way whereby traveling has not quite been seen, especially traveling for leisure, as something to be done by a young Black man. Why do I say so? It's because so many times, whether during my travels, whether it's in Europe or the US, I've always been questioned of my destination. Why are you going there? Why not here? Why not there? Are you really going there? I've always been seen as someone who's either a drug mule, someone who is there maybe for immigration status, wanting to seek asylum, but never one who is just traveling for the sake of the joy of traveling and experiencing new spaces and going on holiday. So it was important for me to really share this new narrative to say it's okay for a black man to be seen traveling for leisure. And the choice of even using this blanket, in Eswatini, such a blanket is usually associated and worn by women, especially those that are elderly in our community, when going to mourn the death of a loved one. And at times it's also worn when a young bride is going to be introduced to a family. So it has those dual meanings. As much as for me it might seem as a picnic blanket, or for anyone who's international can be seen as a beautiful picnic blanket, it also straddles that duality of being a blanket worn during mourning, and therefore I suppose coinciding with the narrative of the entirety of the exhibition. And then the piece, which is titled It Must Be Love, it's also a narration of black love, which at times is never quite celebrated enough. We aren't seeing enough of the side of black love on our international platforms. And it was for me to also celebrate the love I've shared with many people, because a lot of what I do, I've been able to do it because I have firstly been given love, and I have loved myself, and it's only through love that I'm able to do and continue doing the things that I do, whether in my creative space or the community or my own personal space. So love is an important subject, I think, amongst myself as a young black man, and also the visibility of just seeing black love being celebrated than having the negative connotations of our lives being the only thing we seem to see. And with the piece on the floor, Fake News Travels, it was a big, I suppose, stance on myself to deface this would-be luxury Louis Vuitton suitcase. And it became apt to use a suitcase which symbolizes travel, because especially in 2020, when COVID took its toll, travel was grounded. I couldn't travel, a lot of people couldn't travel, but the biggest narrative came amongst the rich, where money could not even buy you your travel bag and could not buy you your next destination. And it was also a narrative on how the rich have been reacting to COVID. We have felt that it's still not enough of the work or the giving which they should have been offering, and then also seeing the amount of wealth that was accumulated by the high net worth individuals. It was, you know, in the stratospheres, more billionaires were created, which surely there's a certain injustice to that. And my take on it was, what are the luxury brands really representing? Is this life they are offering us to buy into? Those are fake lives. Those are not genuine lives. And it's actually lives of aspiration, which I don't quite think we should be aspiring for, but we should be constantly questioning this insane accumulation of wealth without a particular purpose to community and society. This particular piece is really dear to me because I'm one person who's really never been afraid to speak truth to power. I think most of my life I've been raised by parents who've always advocated for us to speak our truth. And with the ongoing protests we saw across the world, and even in Eswatini currently, we are seeing a lot of protest against certain ways in which we are governed and certain injustices, especially injustices caused by police brutality. We are all taking a stand to say, really, enough is enough. And this particular piece, I hope, inspires people never to be quiet. Where you see injustice, it's a part of all of us to take a stand and quash it. And this particular piece, titled Ingubo Yemvelo, which is the nature dress or the nature garment is a take on my background is also in fashion studies. And I have always questioned the fashion industry. It's one of the global polluters. And as we are living in a time of extreme climate change and extreme climate concern, it was my, I suppose, proposal to say, as Africans, I've always known us as people who've been conservationists of nature, where our fabrics have always used bark cloth, just as depicted on this particular piece, which is a palm bark used on it. And also, even with the platform shoes, it's using sandalwood and springbok, which are woods and fabrics which we've always used as an African people. So it's then a matter of invigorating us to return to that simplicity and that way of life which always respected nature. And through African culture, I believe we have always been one sense of continent or culture that has always respected nature, and in our beliefs and in our way of doing things. And hopefully we can really take it seriously that our climate is in a crisis and it needs us to really act immediately. So with these particular jacaranda wood carvings, they are a narration titled The Last Morning Ritual, where I was taken aback a few years ago and even currently, where a lot of young African men are risking their lives to cross the ocean to get to Europe. And I was imagining what would be the last morning ritual, what type of food would be had by this young black man, what would be going on in their heads as they pour the water into this dish that never seems to be able to hold their dreams together. What is that last thought happening in that young man's mind before he sets off on a treacherous journey in boats which are rickety, overcrowded, and not quite there to get them through the journey? And then the creation of this boat of death, that's what I'd call it, is also a focus on really why have our African leaders let us down as young black men, where we have to risk our lives. These oars which should be taking us forward are actually the oars that kill us as we try to get to a better future. And it's also a questioning of the colonialists who did not clean up their mess. It's partly them, as much as it's our leaders, African leaders, who are failing us, but it's also part of a colonial mess which was never cleaned. And it's really a plea to our leaders to say, we love our continent and we really would like to live on it, but only if our conditions are made better.